In what follows, I will present a good afternoon. How are you? I'm good. In what follows, I will present a, let me see, it's 2:06 now. 2:26. In what follows, I will present a theoretical exploration about the concept of urbanity as a characteristic that is typical of the city. The concept of urbanity under scrutiny here refers to how and how much spaces, both urban spaces and building interiors, would be or would not be receptive to people. As a point of departure, the meaning I will assign to urbanity is its traditional and most trivial sense, the one that refers to courtesy, politeness between people, yet, in our case here, applied to non-humans, that is, to buildings, streets and cities. I would say buildings endowed with courtesy and politeness towards people, or in the opposite direction, the inhospitable architectural and urban spatial situations that might be said as low in urbanity. Current tendency shows that spatial patterns set up by what I might call the emergent global middle class is essentially founded upon spatial segregation. And I put middle class here because I would say that if you go to, at least in South America, to lower classes, you might have quite the opposite. Let's say spatial patterns much based on integration, on spatial integration. The middle class essentially founded upon spatial segregation. Such model is essentially based upon long blind walls surrounding introverted residential or work condominiums in large shopping centers, all linked by arid urban freeways. What might then justify a research upon the elements of urbanity, considering such apparently irresistible tendency towards disurbanity? The answer for this question, I suggest, is in the understanding, shared by many, of public space as the locus of a shared urban culture founded in collective values involving the coexistence with the other, the one that is different from us, diversity, exchange, and the enjoyment of a city where urban space performs as an active background for human acting. My proposition then is that urbanity, so conceptualized, would emerge as a major and comprehensive parameter in the assessment of the quality of places in general. Which would be then the determinant elements of such conjectured politeness that might emerge from spatial situations? To answer this question, I am going briefly, in what follows, into a selected literature that puts forward the emergence of urbanity in the urban studies. failures of the modern movement in urbanism as a background, architects started to realize there was something wrong with the new urban developments artificially created in the drawing boards, 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Something was missing. Urbanity was missing. I have selected, for the sake of this presentation, although in my paper I have something around 15 authors, I have selected for this presentation the work of 3 authors as major contributors in the emergence of urbanity as a theoretical issue. They are J. Jacobs, Kevin Lynch, and Bill here. Starting with Jacobs, she's an enthusiast of urban vitality, animation, street life, people in shops, the mixture of building types and human types interacting in the public space, a set of characteristics she synthesizes in what she calls the condition of diversity. Jacobs emphasizes the value of cities produced out of incremental growth. She is especially critical of the urbanizations produced all at once, large housing development situations generally deprived from the architectural diversity that seems to be natural in the city produced by different agents during time. Jacobs criticizes the supposedly cozy, inward-turned neighborhoods, so capturing the problem of spatial articulation of these places in relation to their surroundings. Jacobs' views focused on spatial configuration become evident in her concern with the length of the urban blocks, showing the value she assigns to the irrigation of the city with public spaces, its permeability, a feature she acknowledges as another key element in preventing the emergence of urban quality. Jacobs, although in a sort of random way, seems to identify in her work the main ingredients of the conjectured urbanity, both in its local scale, the architectural scale, and in the more global scale of spatial articulation. Curiously, Jacobs is today acknowledged by some, in a rather mistaken way, in my view, as the mother of the so-called new urbanism. Going now to Kevin Lynch. He sees the urban scenario as a set of spatial sequences where the mobile elements, and especially people and their activities, are so important as the physical stationary parts. Such appreciation puts side by side the physical elements that constitute the city, its stationary elements, public spaces and buildings, and the animated elements, people and vehicles, which endow spaces with life. We are actually in the presence of a spatial formulation where the convenience, to talk in Vitruvian terms, of the body is seen as a key protagonist in the capacity of producing urbanity. Central in the Lynchian formulation of the image of the city, essentially built from questionnaires applied to residents, is what he calls the structural dimension, laid down from the described mental images of the respondents that have shown the visual predominance of the street system and its fundamental importance as network, through which the majority of people experience the spaces of the city. Such a structural condition seems to be a central element in the formulation of the concept of urbanity under scrutiny here, a sort of spatial identity that is relative by definition of each particular space of the city, so constituting an interconnected network. An interconnected network. Lynch Lynch sees in the perception of the respondents a purely structural character, constituting a described image, a spatial structure, a network, a spatial whole that prevails in the imagery of the observer. He talks very much, the respondents talk very much about regularity and about such structural character. For Lynch, such structural condition propitiates or facilitates the reading of the city. Lynch works consistently with the concept of legibility that he defines as the facility of how the parts of the city are acknowledged as organized in a coherent model, in the perception of an observer or a user, a coherent model, a structural whole. Such clarity or facility of being read, showed by an urban situation, once referred to a larger whole, seems to be for Lynch the central element in the condition of urbanity. The perception of such structural character will depend, after Lynch, of a perception of spatial continuity. He says, the main requirement for urban legibility is that the street itself, and especially the road pavement, goes ahead. The continuity of other characteristics is less important. The structural notion of a road pavement performing as a part of a spatial network would be eventually the most perceived. He says, streets, the network of everyday lines, and the potential lines of movement through the urban complex are the most powerful means by which everything can be ordered. Lynch's research acknowledges the importance of visual hierarchy, a sensory choice of the main channels and their unification as continuous perceptive elements. This is what he calls the skeleton of the image of the city. Lynch presents, however, other descriptive mode that concerns us in the formulation of the condition of urbanity pursued here. He tells us about what he calls the kinesthetic quality of the urban space, which comes from its appreciation and understanding en route, in movement. He regards the line of movement as a key factor in the perception of space. The configuration of the line of movement, he says, the configuration of the line of movement will bestow it with identity. The concept of line of movement, once extended to the totality of the urban network, sets up the foundation for the proposed descriptive mode. He says, a city is structured by a set of organized pathways. The strategic point of such a set is the intersection, the point of connection and decision for the person in movement. Once that is clearly visualized, the observer will be able of conceiving a satisfactory structure. In this line, Lynch suggests a diagrammatic description of the urban space by means of the representation of a network of spaces as interconnected lines of movement. He says, roads can also be imagined not as a specific model of certain individual elements, but as a network that explains the typical relationships between all the pathways of the set without identifying any specific pathway. Such requirement implies in the existence of a plan with some consistency in its topological interrelationship or spacing. Such diagrammatic understanding of representation of the urban space, as suggested by Lynch, is coincident, conceptually, with the descriptive method to be proposed by Hilliard 20 years later, that has become widely known as space syntax. This proposition ends up in the work of Lynch actually as an unattainable objective because of the diagrammatic descriptions eventually delivered. The so-called mental maps capture little of the structural clarity perceived by the respondents. In fact, the diagrams tend to be descriptions whose main feature is discontinuity and fragmentation. 25 years later, Hiller et al., in the seminal article Space Syntax, A Different Urban Perspective, present a more precise outline of the constituent elements of urbanity as an architectural category. This happens in the middle of a wave of public inquiries involving harsh criticism of the quality of social housing in England at the beginning of the 80s. It is in such context that Hiller and his colleagues acknowledge that the search for urbanity has become a central theme in architecture. The envisaged condition of urbanity for Hiller sits on three pillars. The first of them is the network condition that is so depicted. The global organization of space acts as the means by which towns and urban areas may become powerful mechanisms to generate, sustain, and control patterns of movement of people. And further on, he says, how buildings are arranged around particular spaces is important, but this form of spatial arrangement can never reproduce urbanity. This is here. How a space fits into an area is a more important determinant. Urbanity and the virtual community are the products of the larger scale organization of space, that is, global design, he says. Spatial integration and spatial segregation are so byproducts of such global scale organization. There would be in the urban inhabitant a natural perception of such potential that comes from location, something that is inherent to each point of the urban network in its condition of centrality. Hiller suggests that such global scale or global arrangement of space performs affecting the way space is appropriated by people. He sees space as an active background for human action, and as such, responsible for the presence or absence of people, the so-called vitality of the public space, following Jacobs and Lynch, as you saw. Here sees such condition of being public as expressed in the intensity of the interface between residents and visitors, or, in his words, the strangers. The awareness of others is not perhaps what sociologists have called community. It is more like a latent or virtual community, which we have come to believe is important for its own sake, because it offers a sense of safety and belonging which may flower into a community. The concept of community carries, by definition, the affinity of group in relation to values and objectives which are specific of that community, while the so-called virtual community would be naturally inclusive of the other, the one that is different from me, Hiller's stranger. The third element of Hiller's urbanity is architecture, the local scale, the way public space is constituted. This is for Hiller the key word of urbanity, locally, constitution, spatial constitution, the way spaces are constituted. He says, the convex organization of the public space and its interface with buildings, the presence of the blind walls or barriers that keep buildings away from the public space may also affect strongly the relationship between residents and their neighbors, and between those and strangers. The concept of convex organizations place Hilliard's proposition in a sort of Sittian level, for such condition of convexity or enclosure is typical of the city acknowledged as the traditional one, made up of streets, squares, and urban blocks. For city, the modern disease of isolated construction is to be condemned. As such, in Hilliard's recipe for urbanity, the more this kind of spatial configuration, where spatial form results from the positioning of buildings, is replaced by the continuous space dotted with buildings in the fashion of Brasilia or Chandigarh, the less the condition of convexity, enclosure, or urban sheltering that seems to be an essential requisite for Hilliard's urbanity will emerge. For conclusion, in the work of the authors reviewed above, urbanity and spatial segregation emerge as qualitatively opposite phenomena, yet resulting from the same set of ingredients or elements, which are eventually summarized in the spatial configuration, or, one might say, in the spatial arrangement of urban space, combining elements coming from the local, the street scale, and elements coming from the global, the grid scale, performing as superimposed. From such theoretical propositions, it has become clear that we are dealing with types of urbanity and degrees of urbanity. The theoretical construction so elaborated suggests, in conclusion, that urbanity can emerge anywhere, simply by the construction of what I might call the second house, though not in any case having only the first house alone, by itself at the plateau. And the essential condition for the emergence of such embryo of urbanity is that the space left between these two theoretical houses must be a public space, a space naturally shared by the inhabitants of the two houses and the other, the visitor, or, in Hilliard's word, the stranger, simply by virtue of its position in the spatial arrangement of that incipient theoretical spatial situation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting. It's very, I think the next presentation will follow very nicely on this one. But also I share very much both the interest in trying to find the spatial criteria for urbanity, if you call it that, and of course we are not alone in that, but also very much the way of tracing the classic text in urban design theory, whatever we want to call it, and also to start to see the interrelations between these. Are there are obvious connections between. We're not alone in that either, but so I just first want to say I share a lot of other common, we have a lot of common interests. But then I also can ask you some of the questions I have, because you can help me. First of all, I thought it was very good when you, my only critique would be the title, what is urbanity about? Not the question, but urbanity is a very difficult word, because it has such a rich set of connotations, and other disciplines will read other things into it. So my question that I wanted to ask you a long time here was, what do you think of that? How one should treat that, and take care of that, the concept, how we should talk about it to be more precise. But then towards the end, you suddenly said urbanity as an architecture category, which I find is very, very, very good. But, so my question is, could you Because I think you also sense that difficulty in talking of urbanity just as a word in itself, right? And how could we be more precise when we talk about it? And what do we actually mean and all of that?
Well, the problem I've been feeling during my life as a teacher of architecture is a feeling of finding elements to describe such a relationship between people and space, and how such relationship could be described with one word that would refer to spatial quality, let's say. So I have to tell you that that was my point of departure, let's say. How can you say that a certain situation, architectural or urban, have spatial quality? What is spatial quality? Let's say, it's a more general thing that is architectural quality. And inside architectural quality, we are in a profession where visuality is normally the main thing. Let's say, people look at architecture in magazines and look at buildings. And my interest with this concept of urbanity and this kindness, this politeness, this sense of courtesy that the concept has when used between people, as applied to architecture, I took it as a way of referring, even taking the risk of its vagueness of the term. I found it more clarifying than any other word we use to talk about spatial quality. I agree with you entirely. The concept of urbanity is a very broad concept. And I even have to acknowledge that I took an enormous risk when I started to use this word, and I have dared to write an article with this title, "What is Urbanity About?" So I took this set of authors. I took around 14 authors dealing with this same characteristic of the city, I would say. But I agree with you entirely. I would say we can develop much more and broaden this concept of urbanity in different ways. And because of that, I took these authors and I took specifically the word urbanity as he was used by Hilliard in 1983 with this article, Space Syntax, Different Urban Perspective, because he uses the word, you see, in this sense. Hilliard was inspiring to me using that. And then I went back to city, I went back to different authors, you see. But I agree with you, it's, the concept is much...
The question is maybe, because first of all, of course, it's used differently in different disciplines and so forth, but also within our discourse, there are different ideas of what should be called urban and not urban, what has an urbanity and so forth. So it easily becomes a normative concept, and what one might want to look for is a more analytical concept that, of course, maybe nothing can be totally objective, but that could measure certain variables that could capture that quality in a more objective sense, not necessarily saying that this we need to achieve, because that's when we start to call new urbanists and all of that, and everything becomes very simplified. So in the context of a conference like this, one would like to develop it towards a more kind of analytical categories that could capture that, rather than just saying. But thank you. There's others.
Thank you.
Maybe relevant to the last question. Well, from your presentation, I'm referring to the almost last paper, last slide there, and you're talking about the difference in kind and difference in degree for urbanity, right? And I could come to a point that there is a difference in kind for urbanity that I think most people will agree. But